Welcome to the table, where God feeds the hungry, lifts up the excluded, and overturns injustice.
From unlikely invitations to a promised wedding feast, Scripture reminds us that Jesus' table is a place of justice, generosity, and hope.
This is the Tear Fund Australia podcast.
Come take a seat. Hello and welcome.
Welcome.
It's good to be here with you.
It is wonderful to be here with you too.
Yes, I am Melody Merton.
My name's Joel McKerrow.
And we are jumping into a new podcast with Tear Fund Australia around the table.
Super exciting. I'm very excited about this podcast.
I'm very excited about it too. We are going to be going through a number of tables that we find in Scripture. We're going to be talking to a number of very special people who are helping us unpack the themes that we find there and helping us make those connections to justice, to our faith, to each other, and to what it means for walking out lives of faith and justice in the world today.
It's great. And as a poet, of course, I love a good metaphor. So that we have one metaphor for this whole podcast series, I'm pretty excited about. We're going to go deep about tables.
We're going.
So any carpenters who are listening,
Yes.
they might really get into this season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good.
But also, I think, probably in the midst of like our cultural moment, right, where there's a lot of friction, a lot of tables essentially being pulled apart, let's call it that.
Yeah.
I think to focus in on this metaphor of coming together, of hospitality, generosity, of sitting around a table and having conversation, perhaps this is the metaphor of the hour that we need.
Yes, it's such an important conversation for our times. Tables are a place of coming together, as you said, but they're also a place of nurturing, nourishment, sitting, being still, listening.
And argument too, though.
Yeah,
right?
the good conversations.
The differences
the
in
wrestling.
opinions and the wrestling. And
Yeah. But when you come away from a table, you have been filled. You've been maybe satisfied, or maybe you come away a little less satisfied because there's more to do. So as you come to this table over these next 7 or 8 episodes, it's going to be a great time to be fed, but also come away with a bit more hunger in you to participate.
Wonderful. Should we begin the meal? Should we start feasting together?
Let's do it. What table are we coming around today, Joel?
So our episode 1 today table, I'd love you to picture we're on the border of the USA and of Mexico, and there is a table set up, and it's a long table, but there's a border fence that runs down the center of this table, and you can hear mariachi music in the background, and there's the smell of barbecue cooking, and there's conversation, and there's festivity, but there's also a fence that lies in the middle of this table. So on this table, the scriptures are open. We're going to be talking through Proverbs 9, 1-6, and we're going to be talking about it with Sami DiPasquale, who was born in Jordan, grew up in the Middle East, has spent the last 24 years in the US immersed in refugee resettlement, community development, and peace-building efforts. He's the founder and director of Abara, an organization fostering connection, healing, and action at the U.S. Mexico border by creating spaces where stories are honored, divisions are bridged, and people are equipped to pursue peace and justice across borders. He's on the board of Micah Global, a worldwide network of Christians active in development, creation care, humanitarian response, and advocacy. And Sami's married with 4 children, and he joins us to discuss how each of us is invited to wisdom's table.
I loved having this conversation with Sami. Let's jump into it.
Wonderful.
The organization that I lead is called Abara, and that's a Semitic word. It's an Arab word. It's similar in Hebrew, and it means river crossing or river ford. And part of our work is reimagining this. In the U.S., we use acres. I don't know if you do in Australia, but 5.5 acres, 7 buildings that are existing, probably add 1 more, on an incredibly historic crossing of the Rio Grande River that separates Mexico and the U.S. So there's a 500-year history. This right here, this is the U.S. Mexico border fence. So I'm sitting right here as I speak to you.
Wow.
That's Mexico right up there. So when I look out my window, I'm looking into Mexico right here.
Mm,
And so we're envisioning this as a borderland center for peace and transformation that would be a mix of a cafe, cantina, event center on the one hand, training, education, rotating history and art exhibits, just open to the public. And then this part here is sort of these outdoor
mm,
contemplative walkways through history, sort of through 500 years of history, because the site marks the site of it's the site of colonization here.
mm,
It's the literal site where the Spanish came up from the south, crossed the river, and in 1598 to claim this land for Spain. And so
mm,
you've got, and then later on it factored into the US expanding westward 250 years later. So it's just got all these layers of history and community
mm, mm,
represented. Realistically, a 10-year vision to uh, uh, create this,
mm.
hopefully, like a world-class center that hundreds
Mm.
of thousands of people will come through and
Wow.
can enter into the stories of people movement, migration, othering, crossing divides, by
Mm,
looking at
mm,
history, by looking at the current context, and
mm,
having an imagination for the future. Our mission is to create spaces, physical and relational spaces for connection, to build towards peace. So a lot of our work is, yeah, like how do we cultivate these spaces for connection? And as we're seeking collective flourishing here on the border and beyond. And so as part of that, we're renovating this space, reimagining this space as a borderland center for peace and transformation. That's one thing. The second is uh, what you were referring to, border encounters, or
mm,
typically a 3-day immersive learning journey or pilgrimage to the border.
mm,
And then the third is just directly responding to some of the most pressing needs in the borderlands, which for the last 5, 6 years has been many waves of people arriving at the border, and especially trying to support small churches that are opening their doors to receive
mm,
people on the move, but on both sides of the border. So when people arrive on a border encounter, the main sort of request from us is just that they're coming in a spirit of humility and learning and asking questions and being open to hear from all sorts of angles. Um, and that's not just with the border encounters, but also probably with anyone who's arriving. That's like our hope is that people are arriving with curiosity
mm,
and ideally a spirit of humility and listening. So
mm,
with a border encounter, though, because we're able to curate that, we're really trying to open up space for people to hear from many, many different voices just firsthand. So part of it will be like right now we have a group that's from a church in Iowa. Um, and they're here right now, they're over in Ciudad Juarez, our sister city. And they're, as part of today, they're visiting at a shelter. And there's a little church that over had been helping just provide food for some of the members of the community that were hungry, but then over time started becoming a center, like a recovery center for those who were addicted to various substances in the community. And through that, some of the had come in contact with some who were immigrants, and then they started becoming a shelter for men, which was very unique. There's many for women and children. This is the only one for men. So they're visiting at that shelter and they're getting to interact with,
mm,
people that have arrived from Venezuela or Guatemala or Honduras, or occasionally from somewhere else in the world, even like um, from parts of Africa, from Uganda and Congo and Somalia. Um, so there's just these human interactions in a shelter and hearing, often people's stories. We're very careful, and this is part of even what we hope um, is taken very seriously by those who arrive, is before even going to a shelter, we have a session on dignified storytelling and ethical volunteerism and how we're entering into a space, and we don't allow pictures, and we're not here to sensationalize anything, and we're not here to even center our own pain. We're here to literally like not be thinking so much about our own discomfort, but just trying to listen to the stories,
Mm.
and see what those stories have for us, and just
Mm.
notice and be present. And for many, that ends up being actually maybe one of the most transferable things they leave with. They're like, wow, I'm never gonna go on a trip again in the way that I did, right? Like taking
Wow.
pictures
Yeah.
and trying to like
Yeah.
maybe tell someone's story who's I never had the
Mm.
permission to tell their story.
Mm.
I never asked, but I got a picture of them, and here I am in this selfie, and I was helping them, or I feel so
Mm.
bad for them, whatever it was. I mean, of course, most of the time the intentions are great, but we take that very seriously, trying to offer to to enter into a space with dignity and respect, and we're on equal terms, and we're just talking. So Rossi, our team lead in Juarez, is amazing at just creating games where everyone's just having fun, and all of a sudden people are just talking to each other as human to human, um, and then actually literally have a meal together usually, and be talking through that. We don't ask anybody to like sit down and share a story. We know that these stories are sacred, and oftentimes there's a lot of
Mm.
trauma, and um, sometimes the conversations go that direction, and sometimes they don't. I'm spending a little bit of time describing this because I think it also probably like is indicative of a lot of the work that we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in setting the table, when we set the table, we're trying to, as much as possible, be a space of mutuality
Mm.
and humanity, just equal
Mm.
humanity. And we're entering into someone's home, right? Like they're
Mm.
hosting us in their home, even if it's temporary.
Mm.
So just the gratitude of being honored to being welcomed into someone's home, and it's usually just a smaller groups. It's not like 50 people. It's like an average size is 12 people.
Mm.
Um, And so they'll have experiences like that, but then also we'll be meeting with all sorts of other people, including like typically Border Patrol agents from the US, those
Mm.
that are enforcing border policies, and hear directly from them. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? And of course, the focus and the personal experience from even just those two that I named, someone who, say, has fled their home and crossed the Darien Gap, this jungle region in Central America, and been on that journey for a month or more, that interaction and what's being shared is so different than, right,
Mm.
like a border patrol agent who is focused in a certain way on their job, which is enforcing security. But oftentimes, I mean, the human element comes out too with a border patrol agent, and people are like, oh wow, like I could actually connect with this person. And so just given those two examples, whether it was someone who's on the move and maybe wants to seek asylum, and someone who's a border patrol agent, oftentimes those who arrive have some opinion already formed
Mm.
about those, as in a simplistic way, those groups, right? And maybe more prone to thinking of one side's opinion more than the other. Maybe they really like one and don't like the other, or vice versa. And our hope is that actually we can really move past sort of these dualistic narratives into thinking about this holistically, and of course, ideally, be trying to view it through the eyes of Jesus,
Mm.
who, how would Jesus be interacting here, um, human to human, and also how would Jesus be responding to the situation as a whole, the power structures, the systems that are in place, um, being wise in the way that maybe combating certain systems that aren't believed to be fruitful or
Mm.
be representative of the kingdom of God. And so we often will say, like often we're hoping that we see transformation at three levels: at a narrative level,
Mm.
seeing change narratives, and then secondly at a systems level, and thirdly at a personal level. I think we intentionally have personal third. Of course, usually it happens with personal first because we're changing our worldview maybe gets shifted or thrown upside down. And then that leads into something else. But we're intentionally trying to de-emphasize the individual in terms of these community issues. Because it's the community issues that have and narratives that have resulted in certain policies. And oftentimes, I think, especially in the United States, um, it's easy to be thinking about faith on just an individual level,
Sure.
and so we're trying to emphasize more of the community and systems level things that sometimes aren't thought about as much. So I don't know if that actually answered your question, but that would be part of like what groups who are visiting would experience. But other things
Yeah.
would be like we'll do like a theology of immigration. Like many people haven't
Ah.
actually like thought about like the Bible as a book of people on the move, right? Most of it is actually written by people, many times by people who are displaced, not by those who are in a state of stability, welcoming those who are
Yes.
displaced from, but actually people who are in distress and on the move. And it's God being present with those on the move. So we'll do like theology of immigration. We'll have immigration legal experts talking about what the law is. We'll do a session on global migration and some of the root causes in countries, but also how U.S. policies interface with that, especially, whether it's military or economic, political. We'll do sessions on like peace building and crossing divides. We'll look at this, like the impact of rhetoric and xenophobic rhetoric and how it actually plays out in a binational community like where we live. We're scared to think about it.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about the past. We don't want to talk about a lot of the real painful histories that have excluded most other communities or viewed as lesser than, right, from slavery to other parts of even our immigration policies, where the US's first immigration policy was known as the Chinese Exclusion Act, and it was in 1882. And so it was an ethnically named act, even, like excluding a certain. So pretty much you can see the intersection of so many of these stories on this site that we sit on the US Mexico border come together because a piece of that history is on our land. Colonization took place from the Spanish on this land, and the man who arrived, Juan Doñate, in 1598 was terrible to the Native American community, including cutting off the right foot of every sort of military age male left over from a tribe. So that's the memory of Spanish colonization from its inception, to Apache resistance in the area, then to Mexican independence, then Anglo westward expansion. And on our site, even if you see behind me here, this was an old house that became an iconic restaurant for 70 years, a restaurant. The man who built the house had a mill, and he built that right after this became U.S. territory. And he brought with him enslaved African Americans. So there's a history of black slavery on the property. And then right behind the house, sort of between the house is between the river and these railway tracks. And the railway tracks were built with Chinese laborers in 1881. And the very first, that Immigration Act I named, is the year after. So this hard labor on connecting the whole Wild West in the United States, mostly by Chinese laborers, that labor's done, and then the
And
labor
then-
force is excluded. So we can track very naturally. I mean, we can track, and conversations open up about these policies over time. Start seeing these connections where it's pretty much been for hundreds of years, right? Like the promoting the well-being of the European origin community over the well-being of everyone else, whether it's Native American, and indigenous, Asian, African American, and other and newer waves of of immigrants. So these are all conversations that we get drawn into, both in border encounters and hopefully anybody who sets foot on the property.
Wow. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it's heavy. And I wonder how, my first question was, how do you point people forward from that place? There's so much history, there's all this trauma, and those conversations and that storytelling happens. How do you point people forward? But I think I want to go back and say, how do you help people to stay in that and lament that and not move on too quickly from that? And then I'll follow that up with how then do you call people forward from that? And how do you give them a vision for what it can be and what the kingdom says it can be?
Yeah, great questions. And those are the types of questions that we're sitting in a
Mm,
lot and uh, trying to understand ourselves how best to do that.
mm,
Um, and part of that work is through the discernment of what we call our wisdom council. So we have our
mm,
board of directors that's responsible for legal and fiscal matters and the strategic planning, taking into account a lot of other things. But then we have our wisdom council that, could be also probably named an advisory board. But we have a local one that's binational from both sides of the border and representative of many or most of the communities um, that are present currently, but also all those ones I named historically too. And
mm,
it's just just even in relation to the conversation of the table and coming to the table,
mm,
it's been an incredible, I just love our wisdom council meetings. It's just like the most incredible people from all these different backgrounds who then can also be giving, sage advice on how to process, on what needs to be lamented, telling the stories that need to
mm,
be heard so we even know. Um, and of course, telling those stories if it's on our property, on this sacred space where maybe some of these stories actually took place, um, can be incredibly impactful. So, in answer to your question, I think, or in response, like on this one half of our property that's outdoor, that I name sort of as a contemplative space, that's really the goal is sort of like how do we shepherd people into hearing these stories faithfully and then creating physical space where people could lament and sit there as long as they want.
yeah.
Maybe it's 10
Mm,
minutes, maybe it's
mm,
3 hours. And so having a little chapel, having meditation rooms, having quiet shade areas, having a labyrinth, um, even the perimeter sort of adobe outside space. It's not reflected right now in this rendering, but we're hoping that it could almost be in such a way where there's just like 12 or 15 little alcoves that people could enter into.
mm,
'Cause sometimes, even for me, having been here on this property pretty much every day for years, I still am hit strongly
mm,
by some of these stories. Sometimes you get numb, right? But then you're
yeah.
experiencing it alongside somebody for the first time who's just overwhelmed with this sense of grief of what's taken place, and you enter into it in a different way. And for us in the U.S., maybe more than anywhere in the world, maybe not. I'm sure there's other countries that have a similar challenge, but in the U.S., there's such a spirit of triumphalism
Mm,
and just wanting to move forward and overcome and
mm,
win.
mm, yeah.
And so when there's a challenge, it's not about, or when something's brought up about a painful part of history, for many, I would say, especially in the majority European origin culture, white community, essentially, it's very difficult to lament. We don't know how
Yeah.
to lament. We feel like the physical space is a big part of how we will usher people probably into the
Yeah.
possibility. Just cultivate a space where it's conducive to being sacred, taking these stories seriously, hearing the story of indigenous communities in the voice of the community. So this isn't
Mm,
about us at Abara creating this story. It's like working with the community for the community to voice their community story and what is important for people to be heard. So like the story from the indigenous community to the historic Black community to
Mm.
even having space available for more stories to evolve as they become known and people can self-guide. So that's one way that we
Mm.
hope to be able to cultivate space for lament. But then even physically in our property, we've created space for more action. So it's almost like contemplation and action.
Yeah.
And on the action side, it's inside this beautiful old adobe house that became a restaurant. It was iconic, it's so beautiful.
Mm.
And have symposiums and trainings or denominational gatherings or but also just celebration. Like this Friday, I'm having my 50th birthday party.
Happy birthday.
And thank you. And uh, last week we had someone's rehearsal dinner before their
Mm.
wedding.
Wow.
And it's not even done yet. I mean, this is just we only have this beautiful courtyard, but many people are drawn to having events there. So part we feel like strongly part of our work is like opening this window to the borderlands and this whole area that often is stigmatized with violence and danger and
Yes.
darkness. And basically, opening up space for all the beauty, the food, the
Yeah.
music, the celebration. Because the reality of these our community, binational community here, is one of the most hospitable, welcoming, kind places in the world.
Mm. Mm.
And while inside the United States, people are yelling and screaming and being upset about immigration, you rarely find anybody complaining about it here. And this is the community, we're the ones dealing with it, at
Mm.
least at the forefront of it, right? So it's
Mm.
sort of people will be overlaying their own opinions on the issue.
Yeah.
So it's almost like how do we megaphone from the border a different message and all the
Yeah.
beauty and the life and the hope. And so much of the hope is I think it's almost impossible not to leave with hope. We
Mm.
get these we people will give us, feedback after a trip and that's something we hear regularly is like one is like literally like I arrived feeling hopeless and now I'm like leaving with hope and they think it's so ironic, right? Because they're inside the country living a nice life for the most part, feeling hopeless and then they interact with someone who has lost everything and is in the midst of a distressing situation and they receive
Mm.
hope from them.
Mm.
And of course, we
Mm.
feel like that's part of the table being set, like who's at the table
Yes.
and how are we together and how are we uh, being able to just
Yeah.
provide the space for those interactions
Yeah.
to both draw us into the reality and the truth of the pain and also into beauty and celebration and hope.
Mm. Mm. You almost can't not see the work that you're part of as a table and this place where anyone can come who is ready to sit and listen to the stories of the person sitting across from them or next to them. And you mentioned before the Wisdom Council, which I think sounds like a great, I'd love to be in that room. But this idea of the table being a place where wisdom is inviting us to come and sit. And this passage in Proverbs 9 that talks about wisdom actually building a house and then getting a meal ready and then calling out and saying, come and eat. Leave some of the stuff, come to the table with how you are and with what you've got, but then you've got to leave some of that behind and walk in the way of wisdom. Can you what is it about this picture of wisdom and the table, wisdom's table, that stands out to you?
Yeah, for sure. I think words that we use often as sort of requirements, maybe become just like curiosity,
Yeah.
um, a desire to listen deeply and listen some more and listen some more and listen some more, um, humility, and an openness to enter into someone else's story. So like the letting go of almost like I'm coming with my agenda, my pain, my story that I'm trying to like give to someone else and coming to just receive. So coming to receive and I think like metaphorically and in a very real way, we see that some of the stories that come out and what we observe is just incredible when um, those who have maybe, uh, have very little materially, who are the most are willing to share the most.
Mm.
Maybe not just at that one table, but I would say those are the pieces that and the words maybe that strike me the most: curiosity, humility, listening, and I don't and wanting to enter into someone's story
Mm.
enough to be
Mm.
moved.
Mm.
Um, I also think, well, I think those experiences they do something to shift something inside of us, our heart, our the way we're feeling, the way we're feeling needs to change. It is what we found. The way we're feeling about an issue needs to change before we're open to any information. So we
Mm.
could throw out all of these facts that we think are accurate, and they might be, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem to like change anyone's opinion on the matter until something inside is shifted where that curiosity sort of cracks open a door to actually want to walk through and ask questions. And so I
Mm.
think sitting at the table does something inside that then opens that door of
Mm.
curiosity to actually start asking questions. And then those new facts matter. But until something shifted inside, I don't think I don't, today, in today's world, and with social media and with people having a hard time trusting all these things, like it's just, you can find a lot of reasons to just not believe whatever
Yeah.
information is thrown your way.
Yeah.
So there's something about the table, and also for us, just the proximity to
Yeah.
division, like the border
Mm.
fence. So you have
Mm.
this border fence that, most places when you're talking about a divide, you might not actually have an 18-foot fence with rolls of razor wire on the top that are showing you the divide that clearly. But when you're coming, say, from 1,000 kilometers away or a couple thousand kilometers away, and you've been afraid for so long about the danger that's at the border and this invasion. People arrive very afraid. And,
Mm.
and it's almost across the spectrum. You would think, if you're familiar with the politics in the US, you'd think like maybe one side of the political equation would arrive less afraid, and it might be true. But this fear has so been absorbed in our national conferences conscience that I think most people are afraid.
Mm.
So when you arrive, and you're listening to this beautiful mariachi music, and you're having a meal maybe around the table, and it's like and you're seeing the fence, you realize like, wait a sec, I'm not afraid, and all
Mm.
of a sudden you're just like, people are flooded with questions like, oh my goodness.
Huh.
And so it breaks through both the table, but I think maybe where the table is placed.
Mm.
For us, like I don't know how that translates elsewhere, but for us, it's
Yeah.
sort of like when you have a table in view of the border fence, but then on the other side of the fence, you actually see cars driving, and you hear the horns honking, and you even, hear music floating across. You sometimes even smell barbecue, and you wish you could go get some, but you can't cross across this border.
Mm.
So then it becomes so clear, like, wow, I'm at this table, whether you're thinking it consciously or not, I'm at this
Mm.
table, but like I can't even like interact with that person on the other side. They're not
Mm.
invited to the table right now. Uh,
Mm.
so I think both being at the table and realizing, wow, who's invited, maybe we invited a bunch of people to the table, but they have no access to it. Um,
Yeah.
Even within our wisdom council, that's on both sides. Like there's some in Mexico, some in the US. Some of those in Mexico have visas where they can cross over when we have a meeting in the US. Some don't. So if we ever want full inclusion of our wisdom council, we have to do it in Mexico.
Mm.
Then there's
Mm.
and so we have to move where the table is if we want everyone to
Yeah.
participate together.
Is there, as we close, would there be anything else that you would say to the church, particularly in the West, or to someone who wants to go deeper in this, grow deeper in this with Jesus, particularly through the season of Lent? Yeah, what would your closing invitation or challenge be?
I think it would be, how do we enter into spaces that we don't control, where we're not in control, where we're vulnerable, um, where we're the guests, where we're not the hosts, outside of our comfort zone, maybe someone we might have an image of as even like of as an enemy. Maybe enemy is too strong a word for some. I heard it explained or talked about this last year, sort of an enemy as being someone just outside the edge of our empathy. So how do maybe we enter into those spaces and as guests, willing to be changed. I think that's a cry that I sense and hear from around the world, sort of like this is a season where in the West, for lack of a better word, it's a chance to enter in, as guests and as and in humility and in listening and in supporting. And then maybe there's an invitation to join in with some of the work, but it's not entering in with all these solutions and answers, but truly wanting to listen and build friendships and understand how we can be of support in helping coming alongside the wisdom of the community to overcome some of the challenges, and many of the challenges that exist today. Our countries might have been a part of creating those challenges to begin with.
So, Joel, how do we enter into spaces that we don't control as guests who are willing to be changed?
Yeah, I loved how he ended that. What a challenge, hey?
Such a challenge.
Yeah, and it's something like even his reframing for me of enemies just then.
Yeah.
Like that enemy, often we think of enemy as someone we are against. And therefore, whenever you hear enemy or engage with that idea, I've always been like, I don't really have enemies. But someone just outside of our empathy, that's something that I can relate to.
Yep.
And so exactly as you're saying, how do we gather around a table with our enemies, our frenemies, our friends, all in together?
Yep.
Is there an easy answer for it?
I don't think so. And I think the giving up of control is the part that I like to set a table in the way that I know and that I'm familiar with, and with the foods that I like, and, a sense of a place that's comfortable to me. But to pick that table up and shift it to a place that's maybe in someone else's comfort zone, and start to push out some of those boundaries of empathy and familiarity, in order to receive wisdom, to listen well, and to be on the receiving end even of the table. Maybe you're not the one hosting the table. Maybe it's coming in as a guest. We're going to talk a lot more about that in the conversations to come. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think it's the right posture, right, as we come in. And because so often our Western posture is, I'm going to come in and help people.
Yes.
But I think this is his ending on what he was calling us to was actually, no, come in and be the guest, learn from the wisdom of the community, I think is how he phrased it. Come alongside the wisdom of the community.
Yep.
That posture is very different.
Yeah.
Like it's one of humility. It's one of taking away my own egotistical idea that I know what people need. But actually, and it's not even about, in some sense, not even about, I need to have a solution to fix this problem.
Yeah.
Even that idea of this problem, rather than coming alongside, sitting with someone at the table, sitting with the community, simply to listen. Before we even go to problem solution.
Yes.
It's the listen. Let's sit and listen. Let's sit and listen.
Well, a table, you don't come to a table usually. Anyway, I'm thinking about my family dinner table.
Yeah.
I don't come around that table to make a presentation or to tell stuff. It's the questions.
My dad did though.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Didn't your dad make presentations around the table? This is the way life is.
Might explain a few things, Joe, but but you ask questions.
Yeah.
How was your day? What was something, that was challenging for you often? And so a table is coming with questions to listen rather than just jumping in with those solutions and those ideas.
Yes.
And we talk about those big global challenges. I think, people want to come in with their answers, but what are the questions that we can ask? How can we kind of consider some of our own implication in the challenges that we're facing today, and ask each other good questions to get curious about it, to start to like come at them from a different angle of with a posture of humility, willingness to learn.
Yeah, and I loved, like, it comes back to what he was saying about people who come to join their, I forget what the name of what he called it, they come and do kind of border exposure kind of trips.
Encounter
trips. So they often come with this idea either of refugees are like this, or people are like this on this side of the fence, and then the border patrol people, they're going to be like this. And often they have such harsh judgments upon these people who are just people as well with their own story. And so this idea of, I just loved that picture of two groups so divided, sitting together to listen to story and being in the midst of that and learning from those that we don't think we can learn from, that we have put into a box and said, no, you're this kind of person. But their story might actually teach us a whole lot as well, not just the people we want to agree with, but the people we disagree with, to sit at that kind of in that kind of posture. I was thinking about this recently. I know this is going to sound a strange kind of segue, but I'm going to bring it back, I promise.
Let's do it.
In terms of ecosystems, right? So an ecosystem is, we've got forests and we've got mountains and we've got deserts and valleys and oceans, but there was I forget exactly who it was, but a scientist was talking about this idea of ecotones. Someone that I was listening to, that the most ecotones is where two ecosystems overlap.
Right. Like a Venn. We're talking like
a Venn.
Venn diagram.
Venn diagrams. We love them. And it's where two ecosystems overlap. That's actually where the most life and energy and diversity and germination is happening, like where the valley meets the mountain. In that kind of ecotone, that Venn, that crossover, that's where the most life is found, between the mangrove swamp and the river. Like it's in those places. And so I love, like, this idea we're on the border. We're between two very distinct cultures. We're between border patrol and between people who are seeking safety. And in that ecotone, in that crossover of ecosystems, perhaps that's where the most life is, if we're willing to sit at the table with people.
Such a good picture. I wonder if we can all have a think about where those ecotones might be in our own contexts. And if they're not there, where can we maybe like push something together to create one?
Well, perhaps that's our CTA, right? Our call to action is often what we talk about. I like to talk about as call to adventure.
Call to adventure.
What's our call to adventure with this? I think is to find those places where our where that crossover happens for us, where we have perhaps been prejudiced against people, choosing to, I don't know, for me, I need to sit down with Pauline Hanson dressed in her burqa and have a conversation with her. Oh, that's where it hits home. That's hard. I don't want to, I want to run from that. I want to put Pauline in a box, right? And say, no, she's just like this. But perhaps that's my call to adventure, is finding the people that I disagree with and sitting at the table with them. She's a redhead. I'll give her that. That's I wonder what it looks like for you. Any ideas?
I think for me it's about maybe I've set the table and I put the things on that I like, but I actually need to grab the corners of the tablecloth and pick that table up and move it to a different place. You know, Sami talked about that, about where is the table placed. It's not just about who's sitting at the table, but where is the table placed. And just go and be able to sit down at that. Maybe the tablecloth becomes a picnic rug in someone else's backyard.
I love that.
And allow them to host, allow them to put some things on the table that are a little bit, it's, you know, I talk to my kids about trying new foods and and being brave about that kind of thing. And just opening up and busting open my world a little bit. The neighbor behind me who I comes from a different ethnic background.
Yeah.
The conversations are a little bit stilted because of a language barrier. But what might it look like to pick up that tablecloth, make a picnic in the driveway that we share, and sit down and listen and learn from them? I don't see them
ecotone,
in the driveway, the ecotone of the driveway. They're not an enemy, but maybe they are on the very edge of my empathy, and I've just let them stay over there because it's convenient to keep in my own comfortable little world.
Yeah. Oh, this has been a fantastic table to gather around for our first episode, our first session together.
Yep.
We're at a table next week. Where are we at?
We are at a table next week. We are going to be hearing from a musician and songwriter, Rory McKenna.
Great.
We are diving into a couple of passages around a table that Jesus is sharing with some Pharisees. So you got Jesus, you got Pharisees, you got a table. It's going to be a good conversation.
I'm excited. So everyone, have a wonderful week, and I hope you do find those ecotones, that crossover where you can set up a picnic rug and have the conversations that need to be had.
Thanks so much for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Tear Fund Australia, a movement of Christians working in partnership to end poverty and tackle injustice. Wherever you're listening, please like, subscribe and share. And for more resources, stories and ways to engage, visit tearfund.org.au.